And let's start with intros and then we'll get into the topic a little bit. So who wants to start? Oh, maybe me since I didn't introduce myself yet. Okay, hi, I'm Jessica Levesque. I'm the Executive Director at C4. Thanks for joining us today. Ken?
Hi guys, I'm Kent Barton. I've been on the Certified Ethereum Professional Committee for quite a while now. I've been in crypto for a while, previously working with Shapeshift. I'm also an ETH Denver steward. I know many of you will be joining us in late February, early March. Super excited to see you guys.
Yeah, I can go next. Hey everyone, I'm Cheyenne. I've been calling myself like PhD candidate, but I feel like in a few months I can call myself. I have a PhD, which is exciting. I've been into more Ethereum and blockchain security. Recently, I've been working on like staking, which is like we're gonna talk some of the aspects today. And I've been the chair at the CEP for the last few years, and yeah, glad to be here.
I'm Josh McDougall. I'm also a board member of C4, one of the founding members. Had a pleasure of being on the CEP committee since its inception. I spent a large part of my career helping in investigations when crypto went missing or helping to secure it so that it wouldn't go missing. But I spent the last 3 years working in the gaming sector of crypto, which is obviously a little bit more lighthearted and a lot of fun.
Hi, my name's Dustin. I'm the education manager at C4 and previously also at the Ethereum Foundation with one of the grant teams.
Okay, awesome. So we've got a good crew today to discuss Ethereum upgrades. So we're going to talk about how updates are made on the Ethereum blockchain. We're going to discuss all of kind of the ins and outs at a high level, and we'll talk about how they're named and what's upcoming. But we're going to start basic explanations, and then we'll get more detailed, and we'll do a follow-up live stream where we really get into more of the process and not super technical, but a little bit more in depth. So Kent, do you want to get us started and just talk about what are we even, when we say Ethereum upgrade, what do we mean? Why do upgrades need to happen and what does that look like?
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. So let's start by zooming out and talk about what Ethereum upgrades are not and why we're dedicating a whole conversation to this, because it's super important. If we're talking about a sort of Web 2.0 centralized app paradigm, much like any non-crypto app you might have on your phone or non-Web3 app, or pretty much any software program, if the developers were going to push an update, they would make these changes, and then you might have automatic updates installed on your phone. They would, as the providers of the service, they would basically click a button and push an update, and you would magically have a new update on your phone. It's a completely different paradigm in a decentralized world. For one thing, with decentralized blockchains like Ethereum, there is no centralized entity that can just make these decisions. So what's in an upgrade and when that happens is up to the community. That's an important aspect. And also the process by which this happens, even if the community agrees to an upgrade, which has happened many times, and it'll happen many more times, it's not a matter of just sort of being like, okay, let's do this right now, and magically everybody's clients, everybody's software that interfaces with the protocol is upgraded. There's a whole different process. So the main thing to kind of start off by knowing is like, or to keep in mind is it's all based on sort of like the majority of the community supporting an upgrade, and then the process by which that happens. The devil's in the details, but don't get scared, because we'll walk you guys kind of through how the process goes. And then this will be a perfect sort of prerequisite knowledge. It's kind of a college type term, prerequisite, but it's good foundational knowledge for what we'll talk about next week, which is the upcoming 4844 or Dencun upgrade, which will bring some new scalability to Ethereum. But this foundational stuff will start here.
That was a great intro. That was awesome. So one of the things that you talked about was community and how the community makes these changes, and people that are involved in the Ethereum community from many different levels come together. What does that look like? Is it like, what's the process for it? How does somebody get involved? Who participates and at what level? Who wants to jump in to begin to get into that? Maybe this is like school. You said prerequisite. I'm gonna just start calling on people. All right. Cheyenne, do you want to explain to us how the community comes together?
Yeah, sure. I was kind of waiting for someone to unmute, but I feel like everyone was doing the same. Um,
We're so
like
polite.
Canadians in this case. Um, yeah, so the community in that sense, like there is a lot of conversations going on. Like we've seen before, even like the community goes behind, they're behind like an update, but the conversations takes up a few years, like even like a few months, and they didn't realize that it is not an update that you want to have. Like Prog Pow before was like one of these updates. But right now, basically like how they work is there are discussions here and there, but there's like the main thing is like a few forums. Ethereum Magicians is one of the first places. It's good to like go there, search like if you see a change that you want to see in the world out there, but like you want to actually propose it in there. But then there's like Ethereum Cat Herders, which are this group that do the project management around the changes. And at the end of the day, when you go through these hoops and you have like good documentations and good support for your EIP, you end up being in these calls called All Core Devs, or you've seen it as ACD, which is like open to everyone. Right now, like great people like Tim Bako, Danny Ryan basically chair and like those calls and like do project management there. And these calls are, if you're a bit technical, really interesting. The conversations that happen there. I haven't been to that many of them, but there's a lot of EIPs that I'm interested in. I go there to see like hear the narrative around it and how people even like question them. So that these are the main places that the conversations happen. There's also on GitHub issues and some other like forums that like also happen, but these are the main parts. And for anyone interested in these like kind of change management, I really suggest to like join in some of the all core devs and do some reading before so you know what their EIPs are talking about, but then join in and it's pretty interesting. And you see that people are also like figuring out as they go a lot of times. Like they learn based on the feedback they get from like other core devs or other changes, and they learn, they implement, and they try to do the better approach.
Yeah, that was a good intro. And some of the terms that Cheyenne put out, like EIP, we're going to get into what that means in more detail as we go along. So stick with us. Dustin, I have a question for you. So as you know, I'm not super technical. I'm not a core dev. Well, obviously I'm not a core dev, but I'm not a developer in general. If I was interested in participating as a certified Ethereum professional, is there room for me to be a part of this community and join the discussions, and what would that look like?
Yeah, 100%. I think there are a number of venues where you can actually make your case for an involvement with your EIP. A lot of time, the EIPs, well, they are technical upgrades, and there is development involved in coding the EIPs or making the changes necessary for the software. A lot of the EIP is about like the change management around why are we making this change. So for example, EIP 1559, it was like an economics EIP because it was a lot of it had a lot to do with the tokenomics of Ethereum. So you wouldn't have discussions around the code necessarily, but you have discussions in economic forums around like, what is this going to do with the tokenomics of Ethereum. So it is a technical upgrade, but not all of the discussions around it are strictly technical. So Cheyenne has mentioned there are a couple of places you can go to. You can go to Cat Herders, you can go to Ethereum Magicians. There are forums on ETH Research, depending on what the specific topic you're interested in is. So you go in there, you have a discussion. When people know you, when they see that you're providing valuable insight, they may invite you to a call for you to make a case. And often, EIPs need a champion. They need someone that goes, this is necessary now. And then as people go on to all core dev calls and make their case, then they also get the counterfactual. They get reasons why this shouldn't be included. Maybe there's a security reason, and maybe there's an implementation problem. Maybe it requires a few building blocks or stepping stones along the way before this can even be implemented. So it's getting into the discussion, getting a larger context around everything to do with the EIP, and then they decide whether it gets considered for inclusion.
And we keep throwing around this EIP term, so we should probably define it at this point. It's an Ethereum improvement proposal, which is, now hopefully that makes a lot of sense. It's nothing technical. It's literally just a document that outlines, we see this this problem or this potential feature or this potential need. Here's how we think we can solve it. And then that document ends up being the kind of lifeline that follows this concept or this bug or this feature through the process. So the EIP is a kind of a living document of how this is going to be addressed. And then it actually tends to form into a standard of what then gets followed in implementation down the road. I think it's fun to note that the first EIP was actually very meta and discussed what the EIP process is and what an EIP document is. So if you look up EIP number 1, it's actually a document talking about what EIPs can be, and that ended up being kind of accepted down the road as far as here's what we do as a community.
Yeah, I like that example, Josh, and I'm going to put in the chat a link to it, it being EIP 1. And as someone who, like I said, is not super technical, reading EIP 1 is something I can understand. It outlines what the process is a little bit and what it would look like. And so it's kind of like when you need to, if you're in school or you were in school and you had to write a paper and the teacher said, here are all the things you should include and this is what it should look like. And it gives you kind of an outline and a template. That's what it's set up as, so that anybody is able to look at it, and no one has more information than others on how to go about and do this. And so the first EIP was how to make an EIP. And again, that's Ethereum Improvement Proposal. And yeah, I put the link in there and it talks about the different types and the workflow and process. And it's, I think, pretty digestible and easy to read. If you don't understand all of the technical terms, it doesn't really go there into the technical side. It's just presenting what you would need to know to start to become part of that discussion.
One real quick thing to add to here is sometimes you might hear the term social layer. This is what we're referring to in Ethereum. Other blockchains might use that term as well, but specifically it's sort of like this is the stuff that happens off chain that really informs the software that's ultimately created for a potential upgrade or what may become an upgrade if the process happens, which we'll cover shortly. But ultimately it doesn't magically appear, these upgrades, the software. It's created by real living, breathing humans, at least for now, until AI takes over. But it's like you hear this term social layer because it's not the consensus layer. It's not programmed in. It's just sort of like this loose process. And if it sounds a little bit like sort of loosely defined, even though we have terms like EIP, it's really designed to be very inclusive, where anybody can present ideas. Ethereum has always been really good about being a meritocracy of ideas and not being like, oh, well, so-and-so said this, so it must have much more weight. Good ideas tend to rise to the surface. So just something to keep in mind. It's just this nice process of people that care about the network and the community contributing their thoughts and suggestions for how to improve it.
Well, and something that I think Cheyenne and Kent, you both mentioned, was Ethereum cat herders. And we're talking about how all of these different groups have discussions. There's different formats, different forums, different levels of technical experience when they're bringing these up. So we mentioned Ethereum cat herders, and the purpose of that is if you imagine all of these different people, different groups, different teams coming together to propose a change and then to make the change, there needs to be some type of project management. And since there isn't a company that runs Ethereum, it's not like there's just a project manager assigned to this and organizes it all. So Ethereum cat herders came together basically out of a need to organize these discussions. Does anyone have any more info that you want to share about how the discussions work within Ethereum cat herders and their purpose, or the Magicians Forum? Or do you think we've explained that deep enough?
No, I just want to add one part is like the naming of it is also kind of explains how it works. As like if you actually have a bunch of cats in a room and you need to hear them, like it's almost impossible to do that. And that's one of the parts that I think Hudson Jameson was like the one that started with the name. But you correct me if I was wrong there. But it was like that kind of thing because everyone was like pushing or shouting about their own change, the thing that they cared about, and someone needed to be like, calm down. You need to like go through this process. And still, like we've seen with some of the like more on the ERC side, like it wasn't the changes in the protocol, but things like Diamond Standard that like Nick was like the guy behind it, was almost like spamming everyone. Is like, hey, we need to get this in, and it was like, calm down. It took like a year, but it happened. So the name also like really shows how that process is defined. It's not really a way to like proper defined structure. Um, for some of the other audiences that are like more traditional sense, I went to IETF, which is Internet Engineering Task Force conference, and they are the ones that like gave process for every change in internet infrastructure, DNS, all other things, and they have really rigid process. And we don't have that in the Ethereum because like even by the time you want to follow that process, that change already either has happened or it's too late. Like you need to be much faster. And IETF just funny thing, when I mentioned blockchain, they kind of laughed at me because they're like, "Oh, this thing that is like passing," which is kind of sad to see. Like all these internet gurus, like like white beard ones, like they don't really want to talk about it. But anyways, I digress. Like we can go back to how
Well,
the
it's just
process
funny
is.
because we know that when the internet came out, everyone, oh, this is a fad, this is going to die, it's not going to be used.
Yeah.
And this is the repeat of that. And those people who may have been involved and gotten the, oh, this isn't going to go anywhere. And it turned out, it's like you would think they would see the potential. And go ahead,
Yeah.
Josh.
I was just gonna hit on that timeline portion, which one, obviously we're in a very fast moving space. Things are kind of crazy. You know, a week in this industry is approximately 2 years of time. But the process, because it's distributed, can be a bit of a flow as well. If we figure out something that is absolutely needed and critical and important, things can move fast if they need to. If there was some sort of very severe bug that was found and needed to be resolved, the framework is there, the proposal is there, the process is there, and it could theoretically be utilized in a pretty quick manner if it needed to. But normally, a lot of these changes are discussed at fairly intense length to make sure that bugs aren't implemented down the road. The ideas are tested and then prioritized. This might not be something that's needed right now, or this might be something that can't be done right now because we have to do these other processes, which is where those kind of generalized project manager folk come in and kind of add that layer to the process of like, yes, this is a good thing, and you believe in it fully, and you have the backing of all these people, and you've done great work to bring us here, but we can't do this until these other steps are in place. So it's not that we don't see it, it's not that we're ignoring you, but the processes will get there in time. So timeline wise, it can be pretty. I'm sure there's EIPs that go on for years before they're actually implemented. But I think if you needed to see the Ethereum community work very fast, I think you'd be able to see that take place too.
Yes, absolutely. So it works both ways, I guess, is what you're saying. And it kind of depends on what the fix is needed. And we'll talk more in a little bit about how, if something is a contentious change or not, how that impacts the timing as well for when something will go through. Before we do that, I think it might be helpful to talk a little bit about types of clients and how the way the network is upgraded has changed a little bit post-merge. And if you're wondering about the merge, when we say that, we're talking about the change of the consensus mechanism for Ethereum, meaning it used to use the consensus mechanism proof of work, and now it uses proof of stake. And we're not going to go into all of those details. I will put in the chat on YouTube the link to our Merge Demystified live stream, which explains that, I think, pretty well. But why don't we talk a little bit about how how updates or upgrades are made and how it can vary about where this happens and what that looks like. So does someone want to talk about the types of clients and the layers and how they participate in these upgrades?
I can jump on that one. So just at a high level, there's two layers of clients, two types, your consensus clients and your execution clients. If you're coming from a Bitcoin background, this might sound unfamiliar to you because there is not like that sort of division of labor, so to speak, in Bitcoin and most other blockchains. So the key difference here, or the differentiator, was a result of the merge, which replaced Ethereum's consensus mechanism from proof of work, which is where you have miners solving, racing to solve difficult math problems in order to, earn the right to validate a block, add a block, and earn mining rewards. Ethereum, of course, is now and has been for a while now proof of stake. This requires a separate sort of layer of software called consensus clients. The consensus clients are what handles basically all the details of like, adding new blocks, determining like, who can participate in this thing and all the consensus stuff, as you might guess from the name. Then you have the execution client, which if you've been in Ethereum for a while, you'll be very familiar with a name like Geth. Geth is currently the majority execution client. And that's sort of more handling the actual, kind of the interfacing with the network, validating smart contracts and transactions, processing the code, things like that. So two complementary but very separate things. In order for an upgrade to happen, generally speaking, this requires both clients to be upgraded because they're still working in tandem. So hence you get these weird names like Denkun, where you have like two different names that are combined. I don't want to get into those details, but it's kind of fun to see how these names work out. But the key understanding here is that these are two separate clients. They have different teams, and then for each client type, there's actually multiple client teams working on it, which is really good. That gets into a concept called client diversity that maybe we can touch on later.
Yes. Thank you. I think that gives a kind of broad overview of how there are so many different components that come together. So if this seems slightly confusing, I think it's because it just is, and that's not to say it's in a negative way. And in any system, when there's multiple different parties coming together, trying to understand how it all works as one can be kind of confusing to go through. But I think the basic information that you need to know is there are all different types of teams, types of people, types of levels of technical abilities that come together to improve the Ethereum network. And it happens from different angles and different ways. But one of the things that I think it is important to understand is how EIPs or Ethereum improvement proposals work, because understanding that gives you a really good idea of seeing what's coming next and how does the community work together to determine what the changes should be. So why don't we start with, I know we've talked around it a little bit, but giving a definition of an EIP specifically and what these standards do. Who wants to jump in?
I just want to add something to the previous topic and then kind of
Oh yeah,
segue
sure.
into that.
Sorry.
No, that's right. So a lot of times, like in software, even like in Ethereum before the proof of stake kind of having like this client diversity, it's like the discussions happen, a change gets into EIP, which is like Ethereum Improvement Proposal, gets approved. The Geth team, or like back in the like any other team, like Open Ethereum, Parity, like whatever that was, they would jump on this and try to implement that. And when the implementation is done, tested, just goes through like the process of like getting adopted by the community. But now, because of the client diversity, we have like multiple teams, multiple software. So you can see it as like the linear thing coming in, the changes are discussed by more people, it's approved, but then it goes to a tree, like as like all these clients need to implement that, test that before going to the next stage, which adds a lot more reliability to the code. A lot more set of eyes are looking at the the specification, the code, and then we have like these other like shadow forks or like kind of testing in the production in some sense, as all these clients should be able to like talk together with the same language, which is the like Ethereum specification, the protocol be able to like function, not to kick each other out of the network. And then we go to the next phase, which is like actually getting adopted in the community. And yeah, I kind of mentioned that EIPs, Ethereum Improvement Proposal. A lot of times, like they used to be like that and ERC, which is like Ethereum request for comments, were like interchangeably used. But now there's like this discussion of separating them, EIP being more focused on the protocol changes, ERC is more on standards. Like you've heard like ERC 20, which is like a standard of a token, or you've heard like EIP 1559, which is like an improvement to the way the fee structure works on the Ethereum blockchain. So there are like these two different ones. So similar to a lot of other documentations, if you go back far back enough, a lot of these are like used in the place of the other. Like there's not really a standard that can pass the test of time. But right now, that's like the way everyone's talking about this. And yeah, if Dustin or Kent, you want to add things to this process or EIPs.
Yeah, I was going to say that you're right. There is a process where the ERCs, EIPs and ERCs currently live in the same GitHub, but they're thinking of a process of separating the EIPs from the ERCs. And I think part of the reason is that they go through different flows, because one is more core developer centric and ERCs are more like app developer or dApp developer centric. So because the intended demographics of the people that are interested in ERCs and EIPs are different, the flow they go through is slightly different, and therefore there's the logic of putting them in different GitHubs such that they go through a different process for approvals.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, with that divide, a EIP really needs everyone to find consensus on it, because that's generally what it means. That protocol is being evolved in some sort of way, and all the implementations that care about it, that need to agree on the state. Well, if the EIP says, hey, when Ethereum gets a message of B, we need to respond C, and one of those implementations reads the C wrong and responds with O, well, now we get to see, well, that one's failing for some reason. Why is it failing? So everyone has to agree. Otherwise, the system isn't working properly. Where ERC, if ERC 20 is a great example of that, it's the token contract. If you want to create a new token on Ethereum, you usually use that standard. That way, the exchanges know how to interact with that. Different dApps know how to interact with that token. It's helpful to know. It's helpful to follow a standard. But you don't have to follow that standard. Ethereum, the network, will continue to function if you're not following that standard. But if you want to be interoperable with different dApps, then it's helpful to follow that standard implementation. But it doesn't change the underlying Ethereum network. So I can see them being separate very logically for that sense. One is kind of mandatory. Well, if this is going to happen, we all have to agree on it. And implement it in the same way. Versus this seems like a good way of doing it. That way we don't have to rewrite this all the exact same way. Great, let's do it.
To maybe put it in a different way, Josh and I could get together and design a new token standard, ERC 420 or something, and this would be, maybe it has different attributes. And we've seen this with iterations on like both ERC 20 and ERC 721, the NFT standard, but it's sort of like a more an opt-in sort of thing where these standards are published and then people can use the code, but it doesn't necessitate a network-wide upgrade where, to Josh's point, there's a forced sort of use of this new code due to the upgrade process.
Those explanations were awesome. Do you have more you wanted to say, Josh?
Oh, I was just going to go into a little bit more on the specifics of EIPs. There are like a couple categories of them, like networking. If it's decided that the way all these clients talk to each other, the way the consensus clients talk to each other, something needs to change to be more efficient, or again, maybe there's a security issue that needs to be resolved down the road, then that networking proposal is there. It's one category. Interface, how do I kind of talk to it? How do I or how do these machines talk to each other? Which kind of sounds like networking, but again, a lot of this is nuanced. I'm sure things end up in both. And then kind of core, like I assume EVM is going to be in that kind of category of like, okay, well, normally, or we want to add something new that smart contracts can kind of call to, again, do something more efficiently, maybe use less gas, or maybe add functionality. We want to add new cryptography to the way it works. So that's that kind of core category. So even within EIPs, there's a number of different kind of subcategories that things get slotted into. And then again, that's going to be kind of different teams along the way. If you're adding new, things to the EVM, there's going to be a set of magicians that probably are very, very specialized in what that EVM can do and what's going to become problematic down the road if it's kind of tweaked incorrectly. Where there's going to be other people who would specialize more on the networking side of it and understand like, oh, well, if we make this change, latency between these two countries is going to be too much, and that's going to be problematic in something. So we definitely get into niche expertise that then kind of focus on those different elements, which helps the EIP process move smoothly. And we'll kind of get into how those calls have diverged a little bit more. I guess then there's also the meta EIPs, which we discussed. EIP number 1 is considered a meta one. So it's more kind of process. What can the EIP process do to actually improve the EIP process? A lot of kind of project management in that, even just standard authoring in general. We were talking about the whitebeards that kind of overlord over the internet protocols, things like HTTP and DNS and all these kind of scary terms that have been there for decades and decades at this point. Being their processes are kind of equally kind of slow and methodical, but very standardized and very specific. So using those same language and understanding kind of how ideas can be described in a reliable way, because ultimately, again, these EIPs need to then go to several groups who need to be able to implement it properly. So the EIPs need to be able to describe their problem and describe their solution in a way without necessarily saying exactly, well, this is how it needs to be implemented. Just this is what needs to be the result of the implementation.
Yeah, something to add there was, so I worked with one of my colleagues at Consensus Diligence to add a section to the EIPs, EIP1, like a meta EIP, which was mainly a security consideration. And that process by itself almost took a year, because like the problem was when these EIPs get like approved and there's enough time passed, no one really wants to touch them anymore. And we were like mainly talking about how anyone that proposing an EIP needs to also have a section called security consideration, which doesn't need to be that complicated, even just the questions or things that it might be touching or things that might fall apart when the EIP gets in. And I feel like no one really pushed this to actually get merged till some issue happened. I don't really remember what happened, but some issue happened with one of the EIPs that there was not enough like security checks on it. So they were like, all right, let's put this here. So everyone that is proposing an EIP needs to actually have that section. And our justification was like, you don't have to have like a full audit for your EIP, just the questions, like just the discussion needs to be there. But it still took a year to get that merged in. But I'm happy that it's there.
That's pretty classic security, that it wasn't until something went wrong that the security was decided that it's important. But I'm glad it slipped in there, and hopefully it's...
That's cool. I didn't know that you were a part of that, Cheyenne. That's neat. So I think we've kind of started to skirt around this, but why don't we talk about the specifics of these updates for EIPs? So Josh, you mentioned a little bit about the process, but Dustin, do you want to go into some more detail about where the process might start and how it goes and what kind of that, I was going to say timeline, that's not the right word, but what the progression looks like.
So generally what happens is that the process would be in either in the forum or the discussion happens and people start talking about what should we do. So actually I have got a screen share that would demonstrate this, but it's not a complex EIP. It's actually explaining how how the upgrades are named. So I think that's a nice fun one that shows how discussions happen and it's not going to be too obtuse a topic. So let me just share my screen very quickly.
We can see your screen.
But you're me.
But oh yeah, but you're muted, Dustin. So we see it, but
Yeah.
yeah, there you go.
So basically it's post-merge network upgrading naming schemes, and they're basically coming up like, how should we name it? Should we use star systems? Should we use rivers? Should we use planets and moons? And then someone goes, I think we use DevCon cities and like the star thing. So Altair, Bellatrix, Capella, Electra, and stuff like that. So then you see this is a discussion. This is similar to an EIP. Imagine that naming like what DevCon what the upgrades would be is an EIP. They have a discussion, people go pros and cons, people talk about this is barely decipherable, it will make it difficult for non-English speakers. So this is the kind of push and pull that happens within a forum. So with technical discussions, it gets a bit deeper. People start bringing their security considerations. This may affect existing contracts and things like that. The discussion happens here, and eventually what happens is that you reach a shelling point where people go, okay, we have general agreement that this is the right way to proceed. And then what happens here is that it may be written up. In some cases, EIPs have their own website. So most of the discussions happen in Cat Herders or ETH Research or other forums. But for really big EIPs, like EIP 484, EIP 4844 has its own site. I think ERC 4337 has its own site. So EIPs that are important or people feel that there's a need to get behind that EIP, they normally have their own site, which has a lot more, graphics, infographics, explanations, and stuff like that. So discussions happen here, and then they also make their way onto all core dev calls. And there are two different all core dev calls now. There used to be just one, but now they've split into consensus and execution for the different client types.
I just want to add before you stop sharing. Oh, I guess you
Oh,
stopped.
no.
But
Sorry.
just one thing I want to say, like it might feel like a rigid process or like kind of dry process, but people are having fun doing this. And that one line there is like it says I wanted emojis as a short reference to the name for the memeability. Like just that line, I feel like that might be why people from IETF don't take this that seriously also. But this is like the new culture of like how everything's happening. Like you've seen the memeability of things are like a big aspect of them. They can push for the change or like prevent the change from happening. But just the fact that this is discussion happening about this, and even the naming, like you read these names and this kind of looks like a foreign word, and it is because it's like a city and a star combined together. But that is how people are having fun with this, and also they don't want to take themselves too seriously, even though this is like building the next financial system of the world. Just want to add that fact that like it might be too rigid, but people laugh a lot at the ACD calls. Like there is like jokes around there. There's like a lot of memes in here and there. Yeah, on Twitter you can usually find them after the calls. That was just like some interesting sentence I
Well,
read there.
I think that's super important because something doesn't have to be only serious in order to be important and valuable. We can have fun with something and be silly and joke around and then get down to business and take things seriously enough to make sure that the code is executed properly and all of that. So it is different, I think, than the traditional finance system where people are coming in and saying, hey, we can do this, we can do it better, and we can have a good time while doing it. The rules are different and it doesn't have to be no fun in order to be useful. So I like that you pointed that out, Cheyenne.
But also the transparency and everything being out in the open helps a lot because like they can joke around, but if the code fails, it failed. Like there's no way to like push it under the rug, be like, oh, let's just move on. Like, no, we have to make it work. So that has a lot of difference between the traditional finance side. Like you could be like at the end of the year, we like, oops, if you forgot this invoice or like this other thing. Yeah.
So one of the interesting things about this discussion is that, the original name was like, is not Danube. The original name was Derby, which was like kind of difficult. So then people were like, actually, this is kind of a difficult name. I prefer Deneb. And then that's how the name got switched to, Denkun, which is Cancun Deneb, because they changed the star, because the original star was too difficult to pronounce and spell.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize that they changed it. That makes sense. I didn't know this until recently, that that's how they're named. And once I figured that out, it made a lot more sense why these random weird words are put together and what they mean. And so it seems like one of those little things like history, and it actually helps clarify. And it's not just some weird random computer science term that, is outdated, or it is kind of insider, but anybody can look it up like you just showed us.
And I
There was
believe
one
there has
sentence
yet to
about
be,
withdrawal, like withdrawal. Like I saw something there, which was I didn't know about. Like if you go a bit up. But yeah, go ahead, Kent.
I think there has yet to be consensus on what the next one will be following Denkun. So we have Prague and Electra. So will that be Plectra, or that
I think
sounds
it's
like
Praktra, but who knows?
Plectra. Oh, has that been kind of settled on in the Magician's Forum?
I don't think that it has finality.
Cool. Kind of building really quick also on what Cheyenne was just saying is like it's an important aspect of all this is everything is inherently transparent. So by the time an upgrade actually happens, and clients are voluntarily upgrading this in order to achieve a network-wide upgrade of the software, the code has been super thoroughly vetted, and then actually all the different client teams need to build towards that as well. But it starts with a public spec, and then everybody's building the software. But the software that's eventually incorporated as an upgrade is all out in the open. The development that contribute to that and the discussion has all been out in the open. So compare and contrast that to the centralized way of doing things, where how many times in the traditional software world, the centralized world has somebody pushed an update, some provider, and it just completely all sorts of bad things could happen. Maybe it created some bugs elsewhere on your computer. Maybe it actually contained malware if somehow that the pipeline of production was kind of hacked or something. Maybe maybe there is hidden features that for example, and this one happens frequently, but maybe that there was privacy or features that would affect your privacy in a way that maybe you wouldn't like. With this, it never happens. It's all open source, and it really speaks to that spirit of open source that Ethereum has been committed to since the beginning.
Yeah, just jumping into like the Praktra name, right? So they conducted a poll on what star they should name it, and then like people suggested some alternatives. Someone did a Twitter poll, and then in the latest call 9 days ago, they've named the next upgrade Electra. So yeah.
Interesting. And the one that is currently ongoing, the Denkun upgrade, is what we are going to be focusing on for our next live stream. But for the last few minutes of this stream, we've talked about Denkun, we've explained where the name comes from, and there are a number of different EIPs that are a part of this upgrade. And one of them is EIP 4844. And so why don't we, without going into, great detail about what it is, explain a little bit so you can get an idea of the things that are included in an EIP. Dustin, do you want to kick us off?
I think I'm gonna show you the EIP. I'm gonna screen share that, and then maybe Cheyenne could do that. So I'm showing you now
go
is
ahead. I
yeah,
wasn't
so
sure
I'm
what
showing
to
you
do.
now. No, so I'm if you can talk through EIP 4844, I'll show them Ethereum cat herders, and basically Ethereum cat herders has a summary for the Denkun upgrade. It tells you what EIPs are considered for inclusion. There is a convenient link for you to go see the proposal, see the discussion, and then there's a nice summary that it tells you what the EIPs are for. So there are 9 EIPs considered for inclusion for this upgrade. And Shine, if you want to chime in on EIP 4844.
Sure. So you may have seen this like on Twitter or other places called like proto-dank sharding as well. But like one of the things this gets a bit technical. There's no way not to be too technical in this, but I'm gonna try. So a lot of these layer 2 solutions like Optimism, Arbitrum, like a lot of these that you've heard, and they require a way to settle back on layer 1, on like Ethereum layer 1, and they have to like put a bunch of data on layer 1 so everyone can verify, and it uses the security of Ethereum for that layer 2. It's really data intensive and it needs a lot of data in there. And the way this EIP 4844 helps is like, so that data only is required to verify that state, and it's kind of like waste at the end after like a month or two. So this EIP provides like a second layer of data within the node, so if nodes can have this data attached to the block, but then after they verify, they do what they need to do, they can just get rid of that data. It doesn't need to be stored in the blockchain. It helps with the bloating of blockchain state too, as like it doesn't increase the blockchain size that much as like it was before. You can see like if there was like Bitcoiners here, they can see it as like the SegWit kind of like this witness, segregated witness signature that comes with like a Bitcoin block sometimes, and there's like that stays there, but this is like kind of similar mental model if you want to look at it as like it's not part of the actual transaction, but it helps, it verifies that. Was that clear? Like I'm not sure if I tried to
Well,
even
I
get
think
to a bit more.
it was clear, but the problem with explaining things like this is in order to explain one topic, it brings it into another and another. And so I think that was clear, but the point is that we can't explain it in a few minutes, which is why we're doing a whole other live stream session to say more about this. So yes, but it wasn't enough because there's no way it could be, because that's why we have another stream.
And but the change that makes for the user is like, hopefully it's going to be reduce the fees on like L2s even more, even for L2 operators, like mostly for L2 operators, but also that trickle like ripples into the users paying less fees. And you can do probably more transactions there, but we'll see. Like a lot of these changes, we have some ideas of how that would turn out, but we have to see how actually the community and others actually start to use it.
Well, and kind of to back it up and to do full circle, what you just said in terms of the, oh wait, shoot, sorry. Josh, jump on into what you were going to say.
No, I was going to tangent us, so finish up.
No, go ahead. You're good.
I just realized that although we've talked about how ideas are discussed, how those ideas mature into full proposals and with a full understanding of the impact that they're going to have on all the different elements of Ethereum, be it gas, be it how nodes stay online, disk usage, how smart contracts are computed, all of that is discussed, and then that all goes to all these different software groups to create, to update their clients. And then how does it actually get put into place? We talked earlier how it's not just like these different software users around the world have auto update on, and the client just the update just streams to them and it's in place. Usually what happens is there's a period in which the software is available, but the new feature isn't necessarily active yet. And we'll see that quite often. So it gives everyone a chance to put the new software into place. And then there's kind of either an activation date or block down in the future, or consensus says like, okay, enough of us agree on this right now. We can kind of implement this feature. And it's about flagging and saying like, hey, I'm ready, I'm not ready, or I don't support this. I actually don't like this change, and things of that nature. So it's not, we kind of, turns out we can talk about this stuff for a long time. But I just wanted to kind of bring us back to the end of that process that says, okay, how do we actually put this in place? And the spot I missed is aggressive testing in between to make sure that it's actually all going to work out.
Yeah, and so it doesn't just go on to mainnet right away. It goes on to a developers network, and then onto a test network, and then onto the mainnet after it's all been tested. And the way that this all kind of comes together from what we started talking about is that somebody has an idea and says something like, hey, I wonder if we could lower the fees because the fees have been really expensive lately. And then that person might propose that we need to come up with a solution for it. And then what Cheyenne said about going through and making different suggestions and different EIPs, that's kind of how it moves forward. And you'll realize, okay, there can't just be one step. There needs to be all these different solutions to it, which is where it gets really big. And there are all these different ways to do that. So that is, I think, a good intro to how the Ethereum network gets upgraded and the specifics of the Dencun upgrade, which is sort of the hot topic in Ethereum for what's next and what a lot of people are focusing on right now. We will talk about that at our next live stream. So stay tuned for that. And oh, this is a great graphic that Dustin's showing. Dustin, if you want to explain real quick, because I think when I said this is the next upgrade, this clarifies that a little bit, what that looks like. Go ahead.
Sure, this is the tweet by Vitalik, which is if you just go to Vitalik's Twitter and then search Vitalik and search roadmap, the latest one he posted at the end of like December 2023. So this kind of like has the different tracks of the upgrade. So they're called the merge, the surge, the scourge, the verge, the purge, and the splurge. As you can see, memorability is important. So you can see EIP 4844 over here, green bar almost full. That means, you know, it's coming up for inclusion soon. So for the EIPs included into this upgrade, EIP 4844 is one. I think another one is over here, ban self-destruct. So EIP 6780 is also related here. So what happens is that all of these upgrades are what needs to happen over time. And when they're deciding what EIPs to include in the upgrade, they're like, okay, where does this get us on the roadmap towards, you know, something that is tangible? So EIP 44 is a big one because if you ask people about Ethereum, what do they complain about? They complain about fees. So that's an important one to get in. Self-destruct is on the EVM simplification track. So there are a number of things where they're packing in the EIPs that they can fit in that are achievable, that get you on the roadmap towards achieving something. And maybe it's an EIP that doesn't do anything on its own, but it is a building block that allows something else in this roadmap to be shaded green and completed.
This is a really helpful graphic, and in particular, when Cheyenne was talking about EIP 4844, and we look and see underneath where it says the surge with the wave, you can see goal 100,000 transactions per second and beyond on rollups. So that's why EIP 4844 is part of the surge, because that is the ultimate goal, and that's what it's working to fix or improve, I should say.
One thing also add to Josh and Dustin's points is like, so we go through all these changes, the software gets updated on the repository, like on where this code lives. But then it's up to the community and every node, like the operator, everyone that runs the full node and is staking to actually update their code and update the client. So you haven't really been seeing that much, but like let's say an update gets updated, but then community is like, no, we don't want this. They can just not update their code or like update to a fork of it. So there is all these layers, like checks in the place that the last one is almost a social layer of the change manager to make sure the changes are everyone agreed on and they need that. We've seen that with like let's say Ethereum proof of work. After the merge, we had this fork, which is Ethereum proof of work. They were like, oh, we want to keep the proof of work, but it didn't get the network support. It just got a few people working on it and never actually got that network to live further. I feel like it still exists, but doesn't really live as a updated protocol. So there's also that last layer of it that after all the tests, everything that the developer is up to the people to update the clients and run it. So Some of them they have to, like the recent Nethermind bug. I had to jump in and update my node because there was a bug on that client. But a lot of them is like, if I agree with that change, if I need that change, I can update. Otherwise, just stay in.
I think the
And I
merge
think
is also a great example of the opposite of that, where there was a lot of concern that the community wouldn't want it. The community would want to stay on proof of work. You know, all the miners aren't going to move over, or the concerns about proof of stake and things like that. And ultimately, the community clearly was completely in favor of it and moved towards it. But there is always that layer, and that takes that social element. There is a bit of politics in it, if you would. Unfortunately, you know, building support for what you're trying to do isn't just within the developer community, but it's within the greater community as well. If the merge code had just dropped one day and no one heard about this idea, it's very likely that no one would have run this random client that did something aggressively different. It was a matter of making sure the community was aware of it, understanding why, understanding how, and communicating with them. So we get back to those non-technical roles. And yes, there's, you know, a little technical because you kind of understand what's going on, but being able to communicate these ideas to the community, being able to teach and educate, and you know, follow those processes is just another way that people can contribute in this space, and trying to be up to date with what's going on.
I think one important part about like why Ethereum has so much process, and it might seem like too much process around upgrades, is because, like, you know, they all have, like, you know, trauma from the DAO upgrade. And the DAO upgrade was an emergency. It was you know, it was something that could have changed Ethereum with that much of the Ethereum locked up in the DAO. So I think that they learned a lot of lessons from that about the social layer and how important it was to get like overall consensus from the community, because there is an Ethereum fork called Ethereum Classic because of that. And I think it's a very conscious desire to not forget about the social layer and have a hard fork of that nature again, which is why there's so much consensus that's being built through all these processes, through cat herders, through all core dev calls, testing all the dev nets, making sure that everyone is walking along stepwise into the upgrades.
Yeah, that was an important point. Thank you all. So I feel like now we've got kind of a good idea, and for the next live stream we do, we'll be going into more details about the Duncan upgrade, and we are at time. So we'll leave it at that, and thank you all for joining. Really appreciate it, and I look forward to the next discussion so we can get into the nitty-gritty details.
Give me a second.